try to cool tomorrow, though I still think we'll have some areas in the 90s in central to southeastern KELOland. Then we'll start to see numbers cool into those locations by Sunday. And we're watching a couple of scattered showers and thunderstorms right now in northwestern South Dakota. Near Buffalo, I think these are having a hard time hitting the ground, so some dry thunderstorms trying to move through those locations as we have air temperatures that are in the 90s in northwestern South Dakota to near 100 in Buffalo at 99. We do have 100 Rapid City and in Pine Ridge, currently 95 in Pierre, 91 in Aberdeen, 93 degrees in Sioux Falls. Winds are light at 5 to 15 miles per hour. A little stronger in western South Dakota. Southerly wind, Rapid City at 17 with a wind gust of 30. But those winds in western South Dakota will change for tomorrow to the north. As you can see, we do have a wind advisory. This is for tomorrow morning going to about noon. Wind gusts of 55 miles per hour possible in and around Rapid City. As you see, our dew point temperatures still in the middle to upper 60s here across eastern and southeastern KELOland. But I mentioned that very dry air around Buffalo. Their dew point temperature at 39, the air temperature at 99. So a lot of that is drying up before it actually hits the ground. On Futurecast, I highlighted this area right here, northeastern South Dakota. There is that wave in the atmosphere that will eventually move right along the border here of North Dakota and South Dakota. This can spark thunderstorms late tonight toward daybreak tomorrow. And these storms may be strong to severe from Aberdeen, Siston, Ortonville, throw in Watertown as well. They will move to the east as we go through the late morning hours. We'll have to watch for thunderstorms during the late morning into the early part of the afternoon in the Minnesota and northwestern Iowa. Now notice I stopped Futurecast here at 3 o'clock. It's bringing back dry skies from near Yankton to Sioux Falls, maybe Worthington and Marshall. But as that front moves through and those winds change direction to the north, there could be another round of thunderstorms that develop into Minnesota near Marshall, Worthington. You can even throw in Sioux Falls. That's during the late afternoon hours at 5 o'clock, and then those will eventually move to the east as we do go through the late afternoon and early evening hours. We have enough moisture available. We have enough energy available to spark or shower and thunderstorm chances in some of those storms. In Minnesota and Iowa, a pretty good chance for strong to severe thunderstorms, as this is an area highlighted with a slight risk for severe weather, which you see highlighted here in yellow, and then that's an enhanced risk the farther into Minnesota and northern Iowa you go. Well, our temperatures for the first half of the weekend still hot central, south central, and southeastern KELOland. Numbers in the 90s. Notice the 80s in the western and northern South Dakota. And then we start to cool for everybody on Sunday. We may have a couple of areas stuck in the upper 70s for northeastern KELOland on Sunday. And that cooler air will take hold as we go through much of next week. And we'll check that with the 7-day forecast coming up here in just a bit. Well, here's our forecast for tonight. Temperatures will fall to the 60s and 70s. And for tomorrow, let's go with increasing chances for rain in eastern KELOland as we go through the day. Temperatures in the 80s and 90s. And on Sunday, it will be cooler, 70s and 80s for afternoon highs with partly cloudy skies and northerly winds. And a sneak peek here at that 7-day forecast. Let's keep those numbers in the low to middle 80s as we go through much of next week. And we still have that 40% chance for a shower thunderstorm on Tuesday. More details on your 7-day forecasts coming up.
Downtown Sioux Falls is about to be overrun by classic cars. We'll have a preview of Hot Classic Night coming up on KELOland News.
With a key member of the January 6th Select Committee, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren is standing by live. We will discuss when we come back. And we'll also talk one-on-one later this hour with Dr. Anthony Fauci about President Biden's COVID case. We just got an update, by the way, from the White House. We'll be right back.
Dad, which one's your...
2A?
Assistant, and she knows more.
But...
Things are our time, and I couldn't...
Censuses are done, including how we work with communities of color and...
And that's the kind of change you notice. Talk to your eczema specialist about Dupixent.
Firearm that we've heard so far deflects our attention from other places where I think we could make a substantial difference.
Several months, and that's the reason why we have boosters.
Right.
But also we need vaccines that protect against infection, and those are the next generation of mucosally administered. By mucosally, we mean through a nasal administration or an oral administration.
Yeah.
And that's what we're working very hard on to get.
The National Library of Medicine, the Lancet, published a study on the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines and the waning immunity with time. And the study showed that immune function among vaccinated individuals 8 months after the administration of 2 doses was lower than that among unvaccinated individuals. I guess the question I get a lot is, why don't we hear the downsides of any vaccines? We really don't hear that. There's a study out of Germany that says the Federal Institute of Vaccines, Biomedical Drugs, the rate for a severe adverse reaction, according to them, is 1 reported severe reaction per 5,000 vaccine injections. Do we have any data about, vaccines and the back end of that, or the negative side of that? There's been a number of studies. New York Times just did one about menstruating cycles and how that is affected by vaccines.
Yeah, well, the menstrual thing is something that seems to be quite transient and temporary. That's the point. That's one of the points. We need to study it more. There are downsides to every intervention, but the issue is, Brett, you've got to balance what we call the risk-benefit ratio. And if you look at the deaths and the morbidity of the curves that no one will argue with when you look at a vaccinated person versus an unvaccinated person, particularly a vaccinated person who's boosted. You look at it and it just explodes out of a slide at you. The difference is stunning. It's not perfect. No one is saying it's perfect, but it does a very good job in protecting you from severe consequences. We didn't anticipate that we would have a virus that has such a capability of evolving and continuing to mutate. And the reason for that, I might say, is because when you give the virus the opportunity to continue to spread from person to person, it gives it an opportunity to mutate. And when you give it an opportunity to mutate, in many cases, some of those mutations lead to a variant that has characteristics, we call it phenotype, has a characteristic that makes it a bit more dangerous in the point of being able to spread better. That's what we saw with Omicron, and that's what we're seeing with BA.5 right now.
I only have a couple more minutes because I know you have to go, but you've said that you didn't believe that it came from a lab leak in Wuhan. Do you refute the accuracy of any of these emails that came out from the Oversight Committee showing top virologists warning you that the virus pointed to gain-of-function research and a lab leak?
Right. Yeah, but what we did, we called a group of highly rated and competent virologists to actually look at that feasibility. They looked at the virus and they said, we really got to look at this more closely. And I invite you to look and ask any one of those virologists who were there. And when they finally looked at it carefully, they said, upon re-looking at this carefully now, we think it's more likely that it was a natural evolution.
And you still believe that? There are more and more organizations that point to a lab leak.
No, that's not so, Brett.
No, I mean, there are more people saying it.
It's not so at all.
Both here and around the world.
Brett, more people saying it doesn't mean there's more evidence of it. Now, we always must, and I'll be very official about this, you keep an open mind to any possibility. And I have been of that bent from the very beginning. But if you ask me and a lot of qualified virologists, looking at the evolution of this and the epidemiological circumstances, you talk to people that have nothing to do with us here. We look at Australian investigators, people from the UK, people from Canada. They say we have an open mind, but it looks very, very much like this was a natural occurrence.
I mean, Dr. Fauci, just to be honest, when you read those emails, it does not sound like you have an open mind. When you read the email from Kirsten Anderson, who says the unusual features of the virus make up a real small part of the genome, and one has to look really closely at the sequences to see that some features look engineered, and you say this is a shiny object and it'll go away. It does not sound like you're open-minded to it.
Brett, I know you're a good person. I know you a long time. If you take a group of emails when people are considering and thinking out loud, and you stop there and don't look at the weeks of careful examination by those same people that wrote the emails, and then say, you know, that we've looked at it in the published peer review literature, they explain very clearly why they think it's a natural occurrence. The same people who you stopped at this point.
I understand, but they're the same people that are getting funded by you, getting money from you, and they published a piece called The Proximal Origin of SARS in the Natural Medicine.
Right.
Did you help edit that piece?
No, I did not.
Okay. But this is where it's going, and you know that there's a Senator Paul and others are calling for you to testify.
Oh, yeah. Fine.
And will you?
But let me tell you, that'll be fine, because what you need to do, Brett, I know you're better than this. You go to the people who are there, and if you think independent scientists...
I've got to run because I'm going to hit a computer break.
Well, you know.
I know. Dr. Fauci, thank you for the time. We'll be right back.
Right. All right. All right. Good to talk.
Some people say the metaverse will only be virtual.
Protection, but no matter how healthy you feel, your immune system declines as you age.
Only available at the Acura Summer of Performance. This summer, visit your local Acura dealer for attractive...
Engel and the motorcade driver, for that matter, have all hired private legal counsel right now. What does that say about the level of cooperation? And do you know if their legal counsel is actually being paid for by Trump political committees?
Well, that is a question, isn't it? You know, every person has a right to bring a lawyer with them when they come to be interviewed by Congress. So, you know, they have that right. But certainly that is a good question you've asked.
And you don't know the answer to it yet?
Well, I'm not in a position to speak to that at this point.
Oh, you do know the answer, but you can't discuss it? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not going to say more than that.
All right. Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, we'll continue this conversation down the road. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Have a good weekend.
You too. Coming up, the White House just updating us on President Biden's COVID condition. We'll talk about it with Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's standing by to join us live.
And hear their reason.
They're still up 8% compared to before the pandemic. Domino's blames the change on a driver shortage. And to help solve the issue, the company started using call centers to free up employees for other tasks. They also consider a more flexible schedule that includes shorter shifts, fewer hours, and last-minute sign-ups. Phil has one more check of our evening forecast when we come back.
Only one station offers over 6 hours of news daily.
A lot of police retirements due to police forces not feeling like there was support behind them. Crime has skyrocketed. So there is very clearly a connection here.
Well, Angela, there's not a connection because, first of all, we see that rising crime might have had something to do with the largest economic collapse in the history of this country.
Michael, if I could just interrupt for one moment, I do want to bring Angela's voice into here and her legal expertise as well. Angela, you have the floor.
Okay, so I don't think that all of these solutions are necessarily mutually exclusive. And as Megan said earlier, government surveillance, if you call it that, is never a good thing. You're not going to have a population that says, yes, let's all be surveilled by the government. But when you look at San Francisco's policy in particular, it doesn't necessarily say that they are going to be invading private spaces, even though the cameras themselves are private. So I think that's an imperative distinction to make here. They are public surveillance cameras in that they are only surveilling public property. The reason why that is super relevant is because when we bring up our Constitution, when we bring up these rights that we're protecting, we don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy if we are outdoors. This would be a totally different conversation if we were saying, let's look inside people's homes, let's take everybody's phone, see what they're doing 24/7. This is solely
hang on, that's a distinction without a difference when there's a camera on every store and every house and they get a de facto access to us all the time. I mean, at a certain extent, it becomes like Big Brother.
I mean, I agree.
Let's not
agree
forget that the taxpayers are paying for
but
this.
I don't think that we need to bring up that this is a constitutional violation potentially of our Fourth Amendment.
But
Well, I mean, it's already gone to the Supreme Court once,
and they
they
don't
declined
need a
to hear
warrant.
it. Well, if I can quickly go off of what Angela was saying, I do want to read a Washington Post article from 2017. It was titled, "Too Much Surveillance Makes Us Less Free. It Also Makes Us Less Safe." And it actually points to the fact that in many cases, mass surveillance and huge databases only cloud the waters. It makes it too unwieldy and actually, in the end, easier for criminals to slip through the cracks. And of course, we've heard the argument, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, that's to hide. Brad, I want to turn to you. Do you trust the government with your private information?
No, I don't. And this argument, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to hide, assumes that the government is only policing truly bad and wrong things like violent crime. But that's simply not true in this country. You know, we have all sorts of victimless behavior like marijuana use in many states that's criminalized. I mean, Eric Garner, he was selling loose cigarettes, right? So this idea that, oh, well, you don't have anything to hide assumes that they're only going after things that actually should be bad and should be considered crimes. But when your extent of your criminal law goes so far beyond what most people find reasonable and includes all sorts of nanny state police policies, then yeah, you know, a lot of people are you break a federal law every day. There's a Twitter account that tweets out random federal laws no one knows about. And there's all sorts of crazy state and local laws, like states making it illegal to have ice cream in your pocket. Obviously, things like that don't get enforced very much, but the laws, you know, you could stack them here to the moon. So they're enforcing so many things that we all have something to hide.
We hear you. And Michael, I want to bring in your voice here. What would you say to someone who says, if you don't have anything to hide, you have nothing to worry about? Michael, are you with us? I think we may have lost Michael.
Well, I mean, if I can just jump into, we have some cases where police forces do not have the best record of asking for permission and staying within their parameters. We know, for example, that Amazon got caught selling information to authorities without permission. So, you know, given some of the slippery slope that we can see here, I don't immediately just want to, without some sort of town square public conversation, which is what we're doing right now. But, you know, these are things that I think need to be brought before the citizenry. And these are things that need to be voted on and not just sort of decided on town council basis to go, is this something that we should be implementing? Because they have gone ahead and done this without people being aware of it in the past.
Megan? Yes, Megan, absolutely. I would agree that this happens all the time, especially with internet companies. So when I said that this wasn't a constitutional issue, I do think there's two things important here. One is clarity of specificity of actually saying which codes we're using when. And that I believe is imperative. And the second thing is getting user buy-in, as all the corporate companies are forced to do when they take into consideration privacy. So getting the buy-in of all the people and figuring out in the city of San Francisco, how willing are the citizens to give up this level of privacy for additional safety? That's a question for the people of San Francisco to vote on.
Angela, we appreciate that perspective, and we do need to move on. Right after the break, the New York Police Department considering scrapping marijuana from its drug tests as the force struggles to recruit. Should departments be lowering their standards? And also later, a woman asks her neighbors to keep their kids quiet while they play outside in their own backyard. We're going to discuss when, where, and if it is appropriate to tell other people's kids to be quiet.
Dad, which one's your favorite?
I'm going to go with Josh.
Yes. I'm sorry. What?
Been wounded. South Korea plans to lift its decades-long ban on.
That's it for us.
We hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for watching.
Tonight, President Biden in COVID isolation calls into an economic meeting. The White House says he's clocking 8 hours at work and improving.
I'm feeling much better than I sound.
The president's symptoms after he completes one full day of treatment, what his doctors are saying tonight about the medicines the 79-year-old had to stop in order to fight COVID. Fallout from last night's January 6th hearing. Could former President Trump be held criminally responsible for what he didn't do during the Capitol riot? Plus, Steve Bannon guilty on 2 counts of contempt of Congress. How much jail time could he face? California trucker protest. Drivers shut down one of America's busiest ports. What it means for supply chain snarls. The brutal heat wave continues from the Big Apple to Arizona, a weekend of dangerous weather. Plus, American innovation, how some cities are battling the heat by changing the color of their roads. Take a look at this. A beachgoer captures the moment a small plane crashes into the ocean. And on the road, making a young boy's dream come true and inspiring others in the process.
This is the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Major Garrett in for Norah. Tonight, the president is in COVID isolation in the White House residence, but keeping up a brisk work pace, that according to his spokesperson. Mr. Biden, 79, held a virtual meeting with his advisors to survey turbulent economic trends and still above average gas prices. He appeared in good spirits, but his voice sounded a bit hoarse. He gave reporters a thumbs up when they asked how he was feeling. The president's doctors say his symptoms have improved, and he's responding well to antiviral medication. The White House continues to stress the president is well positioned to recover quickly because he's been double vaccinated and twice boosted. We have a lot of news to get to, and CBS's Nancy Cordes will start us off from the White House. Nancy, good evening.
Major, good evening. The White House is working very hard to convey that it is business as usual around here, even with a commander-in-chief now in isolation. Today, they made sure that the public had plenty of opportunities to see that he is still on the job, despite the diagnosis.
Let me start by apologizing my voice. I'm feeling much better than I sound.
Confined to the White House residence, President Biden conducted business by Zoom today.
In a row.
A couple coughs and a frog in his throat were the only outward signs of infection as he discussed gas prices with his top aides.
We made progress, but prices are still too high.
In a new letter, White House doctor Kevin O'Connor said the president's mild symptoms have improved. A 99.4-degree temperature last night came down with Tylenol and has remained normal since then. The doctor also recommended initiating low-dose aspirin as a temporary alternative to the president's normal blood thinner, which has had to be halted during the 5-day course of the COVID antiviral drug Paxlovid.
We think this is a relatively low-risk thing to do.
White House COVID coordinator Dr. Ashish Jha.
How frequently is the president being examined by a physician in person?
The president's doing really well, so he doesn't need an ongoing, exam all the time, and obviously he's getting examined at least once a day, but Dr. O'Connor is interacting with the president on a regular basis.
The president interacted with dozens of people in the 2 days before he tested positive. Today, the White House released the results of contact tracing.
The White House Medical Unit has identified and informed 17 people determined to be close contacts of the president, including members of his senior staff. None of the staff members have tested positive to date.
Those close contacts, we're told, include at least one member of Congress who was traveling with the president the day before he tested positive. All 17 individuals are now masking when around other people and social distancing as a precaution in accordance with CDC guidelines. Major?
With key details from the White House tonight, Nancy Cordes, thanks so much. A federal jury has found former Trump advisor Steve Bannon guilty on 2 counts of contempt of Congress for refusing to comply with subpoenas from the January 6th committee. Bannon faces up to 1 year in prison for each count, along with a $100,000 fine. His attorney said they will appeal. Last night, the January 6th committee revealed new evidence that former President Trump watched TV as the violence unfolded at the Capitol and chose not to act, despite pleas from top advisors, Republican lawmakers, the Pentagon, and even family members. Here is CBS's Nicole Killian.
Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger said the evidence presented by the Select Committee speaks for itself.
The president certainly has criminal exposure.
Panel members Thursday night argued former President Trump was derelict in his duty.
President Trump sat in his dining room and watched the attack on television, while his senior-most staff, closest advisors, and family members begged him to do what is expected of any American president.
The committee went through the 187-minute time span.
And we fight like hell.
From the end of then President Trump's speech at the Ellipse to a video telling rioters to go home.
We love you. You're very special.
The key moment at 2:24 p.m. when he tweeted Vice President Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done, riling the mob. New Secret Service radio dispatches revealed the danger facing agents protecting Pence.
They've gained access to the second floor.
And this from an anonymous White House security official who was monitoring communications.
There were calls to say goodbye to family members, so on and so forth.
Missouri Senator Josh Hawley was shown running as the mob closed in, despite earlier pumping his fist to the crowd, while Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's staff fled as he and other officials urged Mr. Trump to respond.
Hey, the Commander-in-Chief, you got an assault going on the Capitol of the United States of America. Nothing. No call. Nothing. Zero.
Former White House aides Sarah Matthews and Matthew Pottinger told committee members they resigned in disgust.
I simply didn't want to be associated with the events that were unfolding on the Capitol.
His refusal to condemn the violence was indefensible.
The day after the riot, Mr. Trump was still reluctant to concede and condemn the attack, according to outtakes from his video statement.
I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
The panel says its probe is far from over.
Doors have opened, new subpoenas have been issued, and the dam has begun to break.
The committee continues its work and that includes pursuing those deleted text messages that it continues to investigate. The director of the Secret Service tonight says that his agency is cooperating and has already provided thousands of documents to the panel. Major?
Nicole Killian, thank you. The Biden administration today announced a $270 million weapons package for Ukraine. It includes long-range rocket systems. In another big development, a deal has been reached that will allow much-needed grain from the region to be shipped to nations on the brink of crisis. And that's why this agreement is being called, quote, a beacon of hope. CBS's Holly Williams is in Ukraine.
This deal could avert a global food crisis, holding off hunger in some of the world's poorest countries.
It will bring relief for developing countries on the edge of bankruptcy and the most vulnerable people on the edge of famine.
Russia's naval blockade of Ukraine's Black Sea ports has trapped more than 20 million tons of grain, while the war has destroyed silos and crops, contributing to a spike in food prices around the world, as CBS News recently reported from South Sudan. The United Nations says 345 million people, many in Africa, are now marching to the brink of starvation. Before the invasion, Ukraine was one of the world's biggest grain exporters, the breadbasket of Europe. Russia's been accused of using hunger as a weapon of war, which Moscow denies.
This deal also allows for shipments of Russian fertilizer, which are desperately needed in the developing world. And the UN says it could be fully operational within weeks. But there's zero trust between Ukraine and Russia, and in many ways this agreement could still fall apart. Major.
With the global implications, Holly Williams, thank you. Tonight, a labor dispute on land is taking a toll on ships at sea. The Port of Oakland, one of the nation's busiest, is becoming clogged with undelivered goods. That's bad news in the face of continued supply chain backups. CBS's Cmgus has more.
This is one of the 10 busiest ports in the nation. Today, it's silent, except on the outside, where truckers gathered for a 5th straight day. They've effectively shut down the Port of Oakland, protesting a new California labor law that makes it harder for independent drivers to operate.
I'm here to support my family because we have bills to pay.
Gladys Hernandez says she's been here every day and has no plans to leave.
You don't want to turn labor, union, and the corporate truck drivers against you. You want them with you, right? Because they.
Oakland Police Captain Clay Birch says he understands the drivers' frustration, but warns of unintended consequences. The shutdown is the latest in a long line of West Coast work stoppages that have affected the supply chain and added to inflation. Cargo here is mostly agricultural.
It's about the greater good. It's about the consumer as well. Think about the end game here.
What's not getting out? What's not getting in?
We're talking about perishable goods, food items, things like that.
Right now, this is limited to Oakland, but there is concern the protests could spread to Southern California, where they are still recovering after massive gridlock last year.
What if people stop being sympathetic to you because they start seeing the grocery prices go up?
It's okay, no problem, but I have two families to support.
These containers start to stack up, the ripple effect is significant. It's not just the protesting drivers, it's also anyone working at the port to on or offload cargo. They're not getting paid. Major?
Cmgus, thank you. Now to the brutal and dangerous heat. Triple-digit temperatures were felt from California to New Jersey today.
Showed new evidence of how Donald Trump's actions put his life in danger.
The Secret Service held Vice President Pence.
The committee played for the first time radio dispatches from the Secret Service agents charged with protecting Pence as the Capitol came under attack. You could hear the fear in their voices.
If we lose any more time, we may lose the ability to leave. So if we're going to leave, we need to do it now.
I gained access to the second floor, and I've got public about 5 feet from me down here below.
An unidentified White House security official testified that the agents feared they could be killed by the pro-Trump mob.
The members of the VP detail at this time were starting to fear for their own lives. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of very personal calls over the radio. So it was disturbing. I don't like talking about it, but there were calls to say goodbye to family members.
The committee showed this picture of Donald Trump in the Oval Office, just minutes after he finished his speech before the attack. Several Trump aides described how Trump then watched the violence unfold on television, doing nothing to stop it.
Are you aware of any phone call by the President of the United States to the Secretary of Homeland Security that day?
I'm not aware of that, no.
After more than 3 hours, he finally agreed to tape a message calling on his supporters to go home, but still not condemning the attack.
So go home. We love you. You're very special.
And when Trump spoke, the mob listened.
I'm here delivering the president's message. Donald Trump has asked everybody to go home.
He said go home. That's our order. He says go home. He says go home.
24 hours later, Trump still absolutely refused to acknowledge that Biden had won the election.
This election is now over. Congress has certified the results. I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
Congresswoman Liz Cheney warned the American people that Trump must never be given a chance to do this again.
And every American must consider this. Can a president who is willing to make the choices Donald Trump made during the violence of January 6th ever be trusted with any position of authority in our great nation again?
John Carl joining us from Washington now. And John, we heard Congresswoman Liz Cheney challenging her fellow Republicans to stand up to Donald Trump. So what are those Republicans saying today?
Well, Republican leaders have been largely silent on this, Whit. In fact, Republican House Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican Senate Leader Mitch McConnell, we both reached out today to ask for their reactions to the hearings. Neither of them put out any statement. Neither of them responded to our questions. Whit.
All right, John, we know you'll stay on top of it. Thank you. Now to the dangerous heat extending through the weekend. 94 million Americans on alert from coast to coast. The heat intensifying in the Northeast. Daily record highs possible on Sunday for Philly, New York, and Boston. A heat emergency in effect in several cities, including Washington, D.C. Let's get right to ABC's senior meteorologist Rob Marciano. And Rob, when could we get some relief from all this?
Substantial relief. It's not going to come really until next week. A couple of pop-up thunderstorms for people who are lucky, and tomorrow will be drier, but still sizzling up and down the East Coast. Temperatures will feel like they're into the 90s to near 100 degrees. Advisories across 24 states, especially across the heartland, and those heat warnings across the Southwest. 112 tomorrow in Vegas. Those warnings have been up all week long. But on Sunday, that's when the humidity increases along the I-95 corridor. 104 in D.C. Heat warning up now for Philly, and 100 is where it'll feel like Sunday afternoon in New York City. And even into Monday, temperatures will likely be into the 90s. That will be our 7th consecutive day of 90-degree temperatures before a cool front arrives. Until then, it's going to be a smoking hot weekend for millions.
Still have to wait. All right, Rob, thank you. Now to that dangerous moment for the Republican candidate for governor of New York, Congressman Lee Zeldin, speaking to a small group when a man climbed up on stage and attacked him. Zeldin wasn't hurt. Investigators tell ABC News the suspect is a 43-year-old Army vet who receives treatment for alcohol abuse and anxiety. The suspect was arrested and charged, but released from jail less than 24 hours after the attack. Overseas tonight, it's being called a beacon of hope in the war in Ukraine. Russia agreeing to allow tons of Ukrainian grain to ship out. And for the first time, the Pentagon exploring the possibility of sending fighter jets to Ukraine. ABC's senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell joins us now from Ukraine. Ian, good evening.
This is a major breakthrough deal in the midst of a global hunger crisis, lifting the Russian blockade of more than 20 million tons of grain that's stuck in Ukrainian Black Sea ports. Russia and Ukraine signing, though not with each other. Aid agencies say millions are now facing starvation. The UN calls this a beacon of hope. But it's going to take 2 weeks to implement, and some aid agencies are warning that it isn't going to stop the slide to famine in some parts of the world. Tonight, the White House also confirming the Pentagon is making preliminary explorations about potentially providing fighter aircraft to Ukraine. Now, if this goes ahead, it's going to be a significant change, and it would undoubtedly be seen as a major further provocation by Russia. With
Ian Pannell, our thanks to you tonight. Still ahead on World News tonight, more on the tragic death of a one-time Notre Dame football star and the dramatic crash of a plane on Huntington Beach.
I'm Mark, and I live in Vero Beach, Florida. My wife and I have 3 children. Ruth Ann and I like to hike. We eat healthy, we exercise. I noticed I wasn't as sharp as I used to be. My wife introduced me to Prevagen. So I said, yeah, I'll try it out. I noticed that I felt sharper. I felt like I was able to respond to things quicker. And I thought, yeah, it works for me.
Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
Giorgio, look, the peanut butter box is here.
Ralph, that's the Chewy Pharmacy box with our flea and tick meds. It's not peanut butter.
The peanut butter box is here.
I'm out.
Pet prescriptions delivered to your door. Chewy.
How is he still playing?
Aspercream Arthritis, full prescription strength, reduces inflammation. Don't touch my piano.
Kick pain in the Aspercream.
Red Lobster's Seafood Summerfest is fire. Turn up for our new barbecue bacon grilled shrimp with your choice of super salad and an individual starter. All 3 courses for $18.99. Hurry into Red Lobster. It's lit.
COVID-19. Some people get it, and some people can get it bad. And for those who do get it bad, it may be because they have a high risk factor, such as heart disease, diabetes, being overweight, asthma, or smoking. Even if symptoms feel mild, these factors can increase your risk of COVID-19 turning severe. So if you're at high risk and test positive, don't wait. Ask your healthcare provider right away if an authorized oral treatment is right for you.
Next tonight, a dramatic scene off California's Huntington Beach. A small plane crashing into the water near the sand not far from beachgoers. Witnesses saw the plane pulling a banner flying low just before it went down. Lifeguards and beachgoers rushed to help the pilot, who survived the crash. We're learning more about the tragic death of a former Notre Dame star football player. Paul Duncan was just 35 and a father of 2. His family saying he died after suffering cardiac arrest while out on a run. Duncan, who was a standout lineman at Notre Dame, played briefly in the NFL for the Broncos. Duncan's wife is saying that she is donating his organs and his body for medical research. When we come back here, the Mega Millions jackpot is growing and getting closer to an all-time record high.
Migraine attacks?
That very Trumpian base. And what does that tell us about the Republican Party? To me, that it's still Trump's GOP.
You know, the Select Committee's hearings loom over all of this, as we know. The Vice Chair, Liz Cheney, last night posed a question to all Americans. I want you and our viewers to watch this.
Every American must consider this. Can a president who is willing to make the choices Donald Trump made during the violence of January 6th ever be trusted with any position of authority in our great nation again.
Michael, how do you think today's GOP will answer that important question?
Sadly, today's GOP largely tuned out. I mean, we were watching, paying attention. It was carried on the 3 broadcast networks. It was carried, of course, here on CNN and MSNBC. But, you know, not a sentence of it was carried live on the outlet of choice for much of the GOP. So to them, it's like a non-event. I think it's been a compelling case. It just reinforced that which I had been led to believe based on following it closely. But we have a problem in this country in that many aren't paying attention.
Let me also ask you, while I have you, Michael, about this very disturbing incident yesterday in New York. Congressman Lee Zeldin, who's running for governor, thwarted an assault. His campaign says this suspect tried to stab Zeldin. We're still waiting to confirm details on the suspect and a possible motive. But how high is the risk of violence right now for politicians?
Escalating, I would say. And let me tell you what doesn't rein in violence, in my view. What doesn't rein in violence is to have a videotape of someone attacking a public servant, a congressman, no less, with some kind of a weapon, unclear to me, and that person is released the same night. Oh no, there's a problem with the system, I think, if that individual is out on the street. And what kind of a deterrent does that serve to someone who might be contemplating something tomorrow?
Yeah, good point indeed. Michael Smerconish, as usual, thank you very much. An important note to all of our viewers, be sure to watch Smerconish tomorrow morning, every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, right here on CNN. An excellent, excellent program. Up next, the biggest diplomatic breakthrough in Russia's war against Ukraine and how it could help ease hunger for millions of people around the world. We're going live to Kyiv. That's next.
As a Main Street bank, PNC has helped over 7 million kids develop their passion for learning through our Grow Up Great initiative. And now we're providing billions of dollars for affordable home lending programs as part of $88 billion to support underserved communities.
Weather in your region? Plan further ahead for what's in store.
This book reveals little-known truths about annuity.
Taking both sides of two different sides of a gubernatorial race there. Let's bring in our panel. Josh Kraushaar, Axios senior political correspondent, Morgan Ortagus, former State Department spokesperson, and Byron York, chief political correspondent of the Washington Examiner. Josh, it is interesting to see this develop. Obviously, a president and a vice president on two sides and a number of different endorsements around the country.
Yeah, Brett. I mean, we now have Mike Pence, who's kind of emerged as the leader of the Trump-skeptical Republicans, not anti-Trump Republicans, but folks who want a little bit more establishment, want to see a different Republican nominee in 2024. And he notched some pretty big political victories by endorsing Brian Kemp when Trump went with David Perdue in Georgia. He's rallying behind Karen Taylor Robeson in Arizona, who's got late momentum in that big governor's race primary. But, you know, you look at all the national polls about who's popular in the Republican Party, Mike Pence barely rates. He's sort of made enemies with Democrats from his time in the Trump administration, and he's not winning any fans among a lot of Republicans either. And you also have a lot of other Trump-skeptical Republicans already running or potentially running for president, like Chris Christie, maybe Liz Cheney, Larry Hogan. So he may have some momentum in these down ballot races. It's hard to see how he's going to get a whole lot of political momentum in a Republican Party that's changed when he was first picked for that ticket.
Yeah, Morgan, the Washington Post writes it this way. Pence seeks distance from Trump as he considers 2024 presidential run. In the 18 months since the two men split, Pence has flipped a switch, returning to the path he was on before he began praising Trump in their private chats on the golf course. Pence wants everyone to know that he is once again his own man, and his team is looking to reintroduce him ahead of a possible 2024 presidential bid. What do you think?
I think we're seeing two things go on. First of all, if I was on your show, Brett, in July of 2014 and told you that Donald Trump is the next president of the United States, you probably would have laughed me off your show and not invited me back in. So
I would have always
we don't normally know who the nominee is. Thank you. We don't normally know who the nominee is this far in advance, so listen. I love the sport of politics and watching it like you, but it's really early. Second, I would say Biden is so weak, and I think that's what Republican candidates around the country are seeing. Both Biden and the Vice President Kamala Harris do not look well poised to win in 24. So if you're a Republican and you're thinking about running, this is a darn good cycle to want to run. So I think that's why you're seeing all the interest. It looks like a Republican's going to win. Yeah. The endorsement thing I was talking about, Byron. Next up is Arizona, and both men are on both sides of this race. President Trump, former President Trump, endorsing Kari Lake, and Vice President Pence endorsing Karen Taylor Robson.
You know, we're entering a period now for the next 2 years in which candidates bump into each other more and can be compared to each other more. So you did have Trump and Pence in Arizona. Tonight, Ron DeSantis is going to be speaking at Turning Point USA in Tampa. Trump will be there tomorrow. And, you know, Trump's big advantage in 2016 and 2015 was that he was such a better performer than all of his fellow candidates. But at the time, he did not have a record in the White House, and there wasn't this possible Trump fatigue that you were talking about after the January 6th hearing. So I think the dynamic between Trump and other Republican candidates is going to be different now than it was said 5 years ago.
You know, you talk to Republicans, Josh, and they say, listen, the January 6th committee doesn't really move it for me. At least most do. Others have been looking at it, seeing not a lot of new information, but compiled in a way that they say is compelling. Does it move the needle politically, do you think?
I think it moves the needle a little bit among some Republicans who may like Trump's policies, think he did a good job as president, but just want to get over the baggage and want to stop having to deal with the inevitable questions about his conduct on January 6th. So and you know, Trump has focused in the past, a lot of Republicans like Ron DeSantis, much more focused on the big issues that dominate our current political environment. So, you know, I think if Trump was the 800-pound gorilla in the room, when he was president, he's maybe the 600-pound gorilla right now in Republican politics.
Morgan, you talk to Trump world. If I put you on the spot on Canada Casino and you've got $100 in chips, whether he runs or he doesn't run, how many chips do you put down on the table?
All of them? I don't bet against Donald Trump. I've learned that the hard way.
So you say he's going before the midterms or after? I think so. Yeah. Oh, Brett, then you're going to play it if I get this wrong. No,
I think after. I'm going to go with after.
Okay, we're going to leave it there, and we'll save the tape. All right, thank you, panel. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Is not an acceptable level for us.
Yeah, as you remind people, there's a way to live life, but there's still a high cost to this for the unvaccinated. I only have about a minute left. But given all the hangups over mandates and what you described as moving back to semi-normal, do you think it's time to rethink some of those mandates, that people should be able to go to work or do things with a little less requirement on them?
Well, people are going to be mandated or not at the local level. What the federal government does, what the CDC does, is provide an analysis of the epidemiology and the spread in a particular county, city, or state, and make a recommendation depending upon a number of factors: the dynamics of the virus, the spread, the hospitalization, the hospital capacity. It's the local authorities, each individual one is probably different from the other, that will make that decision at the local level, whether to mandate because they may have a difficulty, for example, of healthcare providing that might override or overcome the healthcare system. So that's something that is a local decision.
Understood. And it goes to everyone figuring this out as we go. I want to thank you for giving us both the update and your thoughts on the wider situation. The president.
Take home the best savings on the best sleep brands with the best technology. Get better sleep on a budget and save while you sleep. Find a store, find your comfort, and find your perfect mattress price. Shop guaranteed lowest prices at Unclaimed Freight Furniture.
The First Alert Weather Team, only on Dakota News Now.
Tonight, the guilty verdict against former top Trump advisor Steve Bannon, the jury finding him guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress for defying a January 6 committee subpoena over allegations he stoked rioters, saying all hell was going to break loose that day. The punishment he now faces, the growing fallout, the January 6 committee stepping up calls for an investigation into Trump after powerful new testimony about his inaction that day. A former White House official saying that Trump poured gasoline on the fire with a tweet about Vice President Pence. Secret Service agents guarding Pence, fearing for their lives, making goodbye calls to loved ones. President Biden's COVID battle, speaking today, saying he feels better than he sounds. His doctors saying he's improving. My interview with Dr. Fauci. The deadly heat wave, 75 million under heat alerts from coast to coast. New records expected this weekend, and the growing concerns about outdoor events. It's the summer of lost luggage pileup, how to reduce the risk that your bags will wind up in a baggage graveyard. And record-breaking moment for the American who says he's the fastest man in the world.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. Firebrand former Donald Trump advisor Steve Bannon was found guilty this afternoon on 2 charges of criminal contempt of Congress for defying subpoenas to appear before the January 6 Select Committee. A federal prosecutor saying the defendant chose allegiance to Donald Trump over compliance with the law. The verdict coming less than 24 hours after a primetime session of the committee featured testimony from former White House insiders describing indifference by former President Trump as deadly violence was rocking the U.S. Capitol. Tonight, with the investigation reaching a turning point, the committee sending a strong message through Steve Bannon, who himself is still pushing back. Let's begin with Pete Williams.
Just shy of 3 hours after getting the case, the jury came back with its verdict, guilty on 2 counts for refusing to provide testimony and documents to the committee investigating the Capitol riot, which wanted to know about his contacts with President Trump and others leading up to it. Steve Bannon's lawyers did not call any witnesses, instead urging the judge to throw the case out, arguing that the government failed to prove that he intentionally refused to comply. At first, they said Bannon couldn't obey the subpoena because former President Trump asserted executive privilege. Later, they said he never declined to cooperate, he was just negotiating. Then today, they suggested the subpoena was issued without following the rules. But prosecutors said the case was simple. Bannon received a valid subpoena from the January 6th committee and refused to provide anything in response. The jury agreed. Bannon didn't take the stand during the trial, but he did his talking outside, blasting the committee members who the judge said couldn't be compelled to appear.
The gutless members of that show trial committee, the J6 committee, didn't have the guts to come down here and testify in open court.
His lawyers say they'll appeal because the judge said Bannon's reasons for not complying didn't matter legally.
That can't be the standard in a case, especially in a case that holds the potential for a jail sentence.
Bannon will be sentenced in October and is likely to get some jail time. Another former Trump advisor, Peter Navarro, faces trial on similar contempt charges in November. Lester?
All right, Pete Williams starting us off. Thanks. And this evening, new calls by members of the January 6 committee for a criminal investigation of Donald Trump after last night's explosive testimony. Here's Kristen Welker.
Tonight, January 6 committee members are intensifying pressure on the Justice Department to investigate former President Trump after its high-stakes hearing Thursday night.
I sure as hell hope that Merrick Garland has an open criminal investigation into Donald Trump.
It all comes amid new revelations at the hearing overnight, including these outtakes of taped remarks from January 7th, when Mr. Trump refused to say the election was over.
But this election is now over. Congress has certified the results. I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
And the chilling testimony of an anonymous White House security official who said members of former Vice President Pence's security detail were afraid for their lives.
There were calls to say goodbye to family members, so on and so forth.
And on the president's detail, a D.C. police sergeant corroborated key parts of former Trump aide Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, who said earlier Mr. Trump got into an argument with Secret Service agents while leaving the rally, demanding they take him to the Capitol, which they refused to do.
The only description I received was that the president was upset
and that was adamant about going to the Capitol, and there was a heated discussion about that.
A person close to the Secret Service disputes the president ever assaulted an agent, as Hutchinson also alleged, based on what she says she was told, but does not deny the president became furious. Tonight, the agency director saying since day one, he has directed his personnel to cooperate and, quote, we're currently finalizing details and times for follow-up inquiries. The committee recreated the 187 minutes of the attack blow by blow, saying Mr. Trump watched it unfold on TV and never called a single law enforcement agency.
To me, his refusal to act and call off the mob that day and his refusal to condemn the violence was indefensible.
And this moment met with laughter. Trump ally Senator Josh Hawley fleeing the Capitol moments after he'd raised his fist in apparent support of the rioters outside. Former President Trump, eyeing 2024, accused the committee of spreading lies, as Vice Chair Liz Cheney punctuated the proceedings with this closing question.
Can a president who is willing to make the choices Donald Trump made during the violence of January 6th ever be trusted with any position of authority in our great nation again?
And Kristen, the committee's not done. They say there will be more hearings.
Lester, that is right. Vice Chair Liz Cheney said the dam has begun to break and that new witnesses are coming forward. She ended the hearing by saying she'll see everyone in September. Lester.
Kristen Welker, thank you. Want to turn right now to President Biden's health. His doctors saying the president's symptoms have improved after his positive COVID diagnosis. Peter Alexander now with late details. Peter, what do we know?
Good evening, Lester. Tonight, President Biden completing his first full day in isolation here, meeting virtually with his economic team to discuss bringing down gas prices. The president with a smile and a thumbs up and this short message.
Let me start by apologizing for my voice. I'm feeling much better than I sound.
His doctor writing that the president still has a runny nose, fatigue, and what's now a loose cough. His temperature that reached 99.4 degrees last night returned to normal after he took Tylenol. And to avoid any interactions while taking Paxlovid, President Biden, we're told, has paused his cholesterol and blood thinning medications. Tonight, the White House says that 17 people have been identified as close contacts, including Vice President Harris and the First Lady, but none of them has tested positive so far. Lester.
Peter Alexander, thanks. And I'm joined now by Dr. Anthony Fauci, President Biden's chief medical advisor. Dr. Fauci, you had your own bout with COVID back in June. You took the same meds as the president. You felt better only to get hit again by a rebound infection. Is that a cautionary tale for the president, who's only a couple of years younger than you?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a good tale because we know that a person who's vaccinated the way the president is, doubly boosted the way the president is, and has the access as he has to Paxlovid, we have every reason to believe that he will do fine.
These breakthrough infections of fully vaxxed and boosted people seem really common. Why is that?
Well, the vaccines do a really good job, Lester, in preventing you from getting severe disease leading to hospitalizations. When you're vaccinated, and particularly if you're doubly boosted, the likelihood that you're going to get into serious trouble is very, very low.
Dr. Fauci, what is it looking like for the availability of an Omicron-specific vaccine?
The FDA has made the decision that they are going to be going with, in the fall, a authorization of a bivalent vaccine so that you can get coverage from the original vaccine that we had, plus what is projected to be the most likely situation that we'll be facing in the fall. Hopefully those doses will be available sometime in September or early October.
All right, Dr. Anthony Fauci, good to talk to you.
Good to be with you.
Tonight, the brutal heat wave has turned deadly, with tens of millions of Americans still facing dangerous temperatures into the weekend. Jesse Kirsch reports now from Philadelphia.
Tonight, millions of Americans kicking off the hottest weekend this year.
I'm like drenched in sweat 24/7.
75 million under heat alerts today. Phoenix hitting 114, Dallas 101, and Philadelphia reaching 96, but feeling like 106 this weekend with humidity.
Isn't it too hot to be running the Rocky Steps?
But get the heat, it's rocky. Out west, torturous temps could exacerbate Lake Mead's drought. Stunning new NASA images show more than 2 decades of shriveling, extreme heat threatening an estimated 40 million people's water supply. Meanwhile, back east, Amtrak warning it's so hot, some trains need to slow down.
Heat is a silent killer.
This massive heat wave now also turning deadly. Officials reporting heat-related deaths in Texas and Pennsylvania, both victims older with underlying conditions.
What kinds of things can be exacerbated by the heat?
The largest category is going to be patients who have cardiovascular disease. They have underlying lung disease, asthma, COPD.
Heat kills an estimated 1,300 people every year in the U.S., more than any other weather event.
When heat stroke becomes severe, you may become confused, maybe some slurred speech, difficulty walking. Obviously, increased thirst is going to be a sign.
With the elderly and those experiencing homelessness especially vulnerable, groups wasting no time.
Someone literally just said to me, this bottle of water saved my life today.
Heading into a weekend of more record highs, some are stuck toughing it out at work, while others splash around. But no matter what you're doing, in much of the country, there's no cool down in sight.
So, Jesse, that leads to the question, when can we see some of those temps drop?
Well, Lester, we're looking at nearly 24 record highs on Sunday, including New York, Washington, and right here in Philly. The Midwest and Northeast should see a cool down by Tuesday, but the South keeps getting hit through next week. Lester?
Jesse Kirsch, thank you. In Arizona, a test of where the Republican Party is headed, with both Donald Trump and Mike Pence in the state supporting their widely divergent preferences for governor. Von Hilliard is there for us.
The choice for the Republican Party's future is the clearest yet today in Arizona. Donald Trump and his former vice president both on the campaign trail on the same day in the same state, backing opposing candidates in a contentious battle for Arizona governor. Pence for Karen Taylor Robeson, a real estate consultant.
Karen Taylor Robeson as the next governor of Arizona.
And Donald Trump holding a late-night rally for Carrie Lake.
Carrie Lake, I'll tell you, she is incredible.
Lake is a former local news anchor who left her job last year for politics, is an election denier and unrelenting defender of the former president.
When we had President Trump at the helm, we had a secure border, strong economy, and safe streets.
Thursday night's public hearing making the threat posed to Pence on January 6th clear. Now, a notable coalition standing with him today, including current Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers, who testified last month on the pressure he faced by Trump allies to overturn Biden's 2020 win in the state.
Is this a battle for the soul of the Republican Party?
Well, whether it's the soul right now, but everybody's got to reassess. Do we want to be a party that's looking into the past with some kind of grudge match all the time?
Current Governor Doug Ducey also endorsing Taylor Robeson.
More and more conservative voices lending their names and their time and their energy to me.
Lake now calls the media that she once worked for the right hand of the devil.
I've already done an interview. I know what your question is.
Trump has suggested that he will run for president again, but a few in the GOP are flirting with Pence as a possible alternative.
The vice president is a real moral force in our party. He's a real true leader.
Mail-in voting is already underway for this August 2nd primary in what could be a key indicator for which coalition voters are looking for in this Trump-Pence proxy battle. Lester?
Okay, Vaughn, thank you. In 60 seconds, the nightmare of lost luggage. Why are mountains of bags piling up this summer? How you can lessen your risk when you fly.
The world is full of make or break moments, especially if you have postmenopausal osteoporosis and a high risk for fracture. It's time to make your move to help reduce your risk of fracture with Prolia. Only Prolia is proven to help strengthen and protect bones from fracture with one shot every 6 months.
Do not take Prolia if you have low blood calcium, are pregnant, are allergic to it, or take Xgeva. Serious allergic reactions like low blood pressure, trouble breathing, throat tightness, face, lip, or tongue swelling, rash, itching, or hives have happened. Tell your doctor about dental problems, as severe jawbone problems may happen, or new or unusual pain in your hip, groin, or thigh, as unusual thigh bone fractures have occurred. Speak to your doctor before stopping, skipping, or delaying Prolia, as spine and other bone fractures have occurred. Prolia can cause serious side effects like low blood calcium, serious infections, which could need hospitalization, skin problems, and severe bone, joint, or muscle pain.
Don't Don't wait for a break. Call your doctor now and ask how Prolia can help you.
As we've been reporting, it's been a tough summer for airline passengers, and the travel chaos is still playing out overseas, where lost luggage is piling up at airports across Europe. Here's Tom Costello on frustration at baggage claim.
Corey Prenat's dream golfing trip to Scotland was doomed the minute his flight left Newark Airport, but his golf clubs stayed behind. 2 days later, the clubs flew to London, then Edinburgh, then on a delivery van through Scotland, down to England, back to Scotland, before ending up in a warehouse in Birmingham, where they still sit 2 months later. An Apple AirTag inside his bag tells him where it is.
And I've spent all this money, saved all this money for this trip, and it was just basically ruined.
Kathy Riva flew to Barcelona for a family event, but her bags bounced around Europe before ending up with thousands of lost bags in London. Delta even flew her to London to find them. No luck.
The mountain of bags just kind of kept growing as you looked down all of the belts and the conveyor belts where the bags come off.
Her luggage finally arrived in New York 3 weeks later. Across Europe, airports have turned into luggage graveyards as understaffed airlines and airports struggle with surging passenger levels. On Thursday, we packed AirTags inside family members' luggage as they traveled to Belgium, then followed their bags through Washington onto the plane, eventually landing in Brussels today. U.S. airlines and airports struggled earlier this summer, but now report improving operations.
We had a rough 6 weeks, no question about that. We're sorry for our customers.
If you have to check a bag, experts advise using the airline app to track your bag. Put AirTags in your bag, IDs inside and out. And if you can, fly direct. Connections can lead to luggage hiccups. Lester?
Okay, Tom, thank you. When we come back, it's the technology that powers everything from our air conditioners to missiles, why Washington is scrambling to get more of it made in America.
Thinkorswim by TD Ameritrade is more than a trading platform. It's an entire trading experience. With innovation that lets you customize interfaces, charts, and orders to your style of trading. Personalized education to expand your
southeastern KELOland, things will redevelop, and you see that at 5 o'clock near Marshall, Worthington. You could even throw in Sioux Falls. Redeveloping thunderstorms later in the afternoon, and those storms will eventually move to the east as we go through the evening hours. Slight risk for severe weather, mainly in Minnesota and Iowa. Those areas highlighted in yellow. And then the farther you go into Minnesota and northern Iowa, it becomes an enhanced risk. I mentioned a cooler weather in western South Dakota for tomorrow as temperatures do fall to the 80s. Looks like we'll have numbers in the 90s in the central to southeastern KELOland. And then everybody should cool by Sunday. Forecast tonight showing temperatures falling to the 60s and 70s. Numbers tomorrow will hit the 80s and 90s. And our forecast on Sunday mentioned that cooler weather as temperatures retreat to the 70s and 80s for highs. 7-day forecast looks like we'll have our numbers into the low to middle 80s as we go through next week. Next chance for rain is Tuesday. Aberdeen and northeastern South Dakota, temperatures only in the 70s on Sunday. Expect numbers in the lower 80s next week. Central South Dakota looking at temperatures in the low to middle 80s after tomorrow's high of 95.
Strong and healthy.
3 on that scale of 5. So be weather aware, especially in eastern parts of the Dakota News Now coverage area. 10-day forecast now, first of all, for the Sioux Falls area for tomorrow. Sioux Falls and Lake Andes tomorrow, scattered showers and storms, 94. Really nice on Sunday, 85, lower humidity, lower temperatures. And then just spotty chances of storms Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The rest of the 10-day forecast looking pretty dry. Will warm back up into the 90s by next weekend. Aberdeen and Sisseton, your 10-day forecast now. You've got that chance for some scattered storms tomorrow. Sunday's looking good. Just slight chances of storms and off and on through the rest of our 10-day forecast with highs in the 80s for a few days before we get back up into the low 90s by next weekend. And for Pierre and Cedar Butte, here's your 10-day forecast now. 90 tomorrow, slight chances of storms. In fact, just slight chances
of our Capitol Police, how courageous they were while you're seeing somebody like Josh Hawley running away and letting our poor Capitol Police have to be beaten for hours while Donald Trump was just sitting there watching this violence go on. So I think, yes, they've been very successful on that front. But I also expect there will be lots more evidence coming forward. We've seen these courageous young women like that we've seen that Donald Trump continues to attack, and they get death threats. But I do think there are more people daily coming forward who are going to continue to fill out this record. And I do think that the Justice Department will be able to fill in those gaps. And I expect we'll be able to have more indictments and continue to have convictions like we had today with Steve Bannon.
Former Republican Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, former Democratic Senator Doug Jones. We thank you both.
Thank you.
Today, Russia and Ukraine signed agreements that clear the way for exporting millions of tons of desperately needed Ukrainian grain, as well as guaranteeing Russian exports of its grain and fertilizers. Ukraine is one of the world's largest exporters of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil. Cutting off its supply had sent grain prices higher worldwide and threatened global food security, compounding famine in parts of Africa. John Yang has more.
Judy, the deal aims to end a wartime standoff that's had some 20 million tons of grain stuck in Ukrainian ports since the Russian invasion. 3 Ukrainian ports will now be open. Shipments have been blocked by both a Russian naval blockade and Ukraine's use of mines to defend the ports. Today's agreement guarantees safe passage for Ukrainian vessels from the ports, overseen by a coordination center in Turkey. Earlier, I spoke with a key negotiator, UN Undersecretary Martin Griffiths. I asked him about the significance of the agreement.
The principal significance for us is, of course, the contribution to reducing food insecurity around the world. This is an agreement for the world. It's not an agreement just for Ukraine or Russia or even Europe. And if I'm right, we've seen wheat prices go down today by 4 or 5%. Because of the agreement. So the 2 ways in which this food insecurity around the world, which has been so attributable in large part to the Ukraine war, is that there'll be much more grain and fertilizers out into the market from both Russia and Ukraine, but also that they will come at a reduced price. I cannot think of an example of an agreement mediated between 2 warring parties in the middle of a hot war, producing a benefit that is attributable to global welfare. I don't think that has happened before. It's also an agreement made by the two parties. It shows they can do that. They can negotiate in good faith and come to an agreement.
How quickly, how soon do you think grain will start leaving Ukrainian ports? And perhaps more important, how soon will the effects be felt in the areas suffering from famine now?
The Ukrainians were telling us here today that their ports would be ready to export grain within 2 days, 2 or 3 days. They're ready to go. They have to identify safe shipping lanes, and then the corridor across the Black Sea that has to be done also with our Joint Coordination Center. So setting that up and getting inspection teams ready is probably going to take a couple of weeks. Impact on places in famine, of course, it depends where those are. The one that's very much at the top of my agenda, the Horn, right, where we see absolutely terrible prospects in Somalia. So I think we'll see immediately prices tapering down, which will be felt by people in those areas of conflict. Famine is a bit more complicated because it's not just a price issue, although it is partly. It's also getting produce there. And to get wheat, let's say, from Odessa to Egypt or to, through to Port Sudan or something, takes some weeks. So I think we'll have an impact on the market immediately, but there are some places, this is what's so bad about this year, who are already perhaps beyond the point where this can deliver.
This, of course, agreement deals with grain that's already been harvested. It's been sitting in the ports. But there has been great destruction to one of the great breadbaskets of the world in the farmland in Ukraine. How much of a problem will that present in the future, the damage and destruction to farmland in Ukraine?
There's been talk about getting tractor spares and so on back in to Ukraine and, by the way, to Russia. And this came up from time to time in this negotiation of our Black Sea deal, where we said, look, we're just negotiating grain out at the moment. We've got to make that the simple-ish priority. But if the parties agree and build confidence, they could start importing stuff into Ukraine to do the job that you're talking about. But let us be under few illusions, this ain't stopping the war. This is just getting the grain out. I'd like to think that the fact that the parties can agree to this means that maybe there will come a time when this confidence between them can make them agree to other things too. And we're already beginning to have kind of conversations about that.
You mentioned also that there's a piece of this about Russian grain and Russian fertilizer.
Yeah.
Could you explain that to us?
There are two agreements signed today. What is involved in that is removing impediments to the export of grain and fertilizer from Russia. As you know, they're not sanctioned anyway. So this isn't about removing sanctions, but it's removing impediments. So even if you don't have a sanction, banks won't get involved in trading out the grain and fertilizer from Russia. So it's about comfort letters, it's about statements by particularly the US and the EU that no, grain and fertilizer, please export them.
Secretary General referred to this as a beacon of hope and a beacon of possibility. You also talked about the sort of unusual aspect of this, that this is an agreement between warring parties. Could this also show some hope and some possibility of other areas of negotiation, other areas of agreement?
I hope so. I would like to think that this will encourage us, Turkey, the parties, to think of further humanitarian areas where we can find better agreements. There's still large parts of Ukraine where humanitarian access is limited because of the fighting. And we are still trying to get our aid in through cross lines and so forth. Let's at least look to humanitarian benefits in war. And then let's dream a little about whether we could move from there.
Martin Griffiths, the UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
The U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill yesterday guaranteeing women the right to buy and use contraceptives without restrictions, no matter what a state government may decide to do. It is not clear if the bill will pass the Senate as well. But many advocates for reproductive access say it is time to codify such protections into federal law in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. And some have long called for an over-the-counter contraceptive that women can get without a prescription. Amna Nawaz looks at how that could be changing soon.
Judy, women have been able to get birth control pills with a prescription for 6 decades. But unlike many other countries, over 100 of them, the U.S. still has not authorized an over-the-counter option yet. Now, a French drug maker, HRA Pharma, is asking the FDA to approve a daily birth control pill offered over the counter for the first time. The same pill was approved by prescription only back in 1973, but has not been marketed in the U.S. for over a decade. It's a progestin-only pill called Opill, and the FDA's review may take 10 months or so. Dr. Jennifer Villavicencio heads equity transformation for the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, or ACOG as it's known. She joins me now. Doctor, welcome to the NewsHour. Thank you for making the time. So let's just start with your view on this. What do you think? Should the FDA approve this over-the-counter status?
Thank you so much for having me. And at ACOG, as a board-certified obstetrician gynecologist, I'm thrilled to see this application. As you mentioned, we are out of step with our peer countries as it relates to over-the-counter birth control. We have excellent data to show that it is safe and really helps people who need birth control be able to access it without the barrier of a prescription. And so we're excited at the prospect that the FDA may allow over-the-counter birth control in the United States.
Let's just start with why we're so far off from our peer countries. Why has it taken the U.S. so long?
It's hard to speculate exactly why this would be. The FDA process is definitely a complex one and a rigorous one, which should reassure viewers and reassure people who are out there that if we do get over-the-counter birth control, we'll know that it is safe and reasonable to be over-the-counter. There's a lot of concerns about risk factors and about complications as they result from birth control, but we know from the data that birth control is really, really safe. And we also know that if the FDA does approve it, that it will be an excellent way for people to access birth control without barriers.
So if this improves access, if this is approved and it does improve access for women, why are you thrilled about it? As you said, what kind of a difference can this make in the lives of women?
So we know that many people who need birth control they use it over the course of their lifetime. So we know that over 90% of Americans and American women use birth control at some point in their lives, and that spans professions, religions, race, all different types of people need birth control. And so being able to access that, particularly in a very uncertain time right now, is something that will be incredibly helpful to those people who need it, particularly those who are most marginalized in our country, those who are underinsured or uninsured, who have difficulty getting into a doctor to be able to get a prescription. And so being able to be an expert in their own lives and go to a drugstore or a pharmacy and say, I'm ready to start birth control, will be an excellent way for people to access this essential health care.
So this would mean that you don't have to consult with a doctor, right? Have those conversations you sometimes have before beginning a medication. And also there wouldn't be an age limit. Do you have any concerns with that?
Definitely no concerns with the age limit. We know that young adults are able to make decisions about medications and particularly contraception. And I also want to emphasize that this doesn't replace going to the doctor. It just removes the barrier of needing to go to the doctor if you want birth control. Birth control is really, really safe. And so in the same way that you go to the pharmacy to get ibuprofen or Tylenol when you have a headache or cold medicine when you have a stuffy nose, people will now be able to do this to be able to prevent pregnancy. And if they want to consult with a doctor, if they want to call their healthcare professional, we're always here to be able to talk to them about it. But we won't be standing in the way of their medication with a prescription.
So many birth control pills contain estrogen, right? But this one does not. It is progestin only. Does that raise any concerns for you? Does it change the efficacy? What should people know?
So people should know that there are lots of different types of birth control, some that are combined hormonal, including estrogen and a progestin, or progestin-only medication, so a singular hormone in it. And both are very efficacious. Both are, with typical use, about 93% effective, so highly effective at preventing pregnancy. And then with perfect use, they're around 99%. We know that different people are better for certain types of medications based on side effects or risk factors. And most people can take a progestin-only pill very safely. And so we're excited to see the application for this progestin-only pill come over the counter. And we're excited to see people be able to use it in their lives.
You mentioned these uncertain times. I'm going to assume that you were talking about the recent overturning of the Roe v. Wade decision. That's now led lawmakers to consider federal protection for contraceptive access. I wonder about your take on that. Do you think that's necessary right now?
I think that we are seeing unprecedented attacks on the ability of people to access essential health care, including abortion. And there has been some mention, even in Supreme Court documents, of potentially impacting the right to access contraception. And so I think the federal government doing anything it possibly can to protect the rights of Americans to access essential health care is something that we support.
Do you see this method, over-the-counter birth controls, becoming the norm here in America one day?
I certainly hope so. I hope that the FDA will approve the application for over-the-counter birth control, which will open up options for people. Again, will not replace a doctor's visit. People will still be more than welcome to come in and talk about birth control, about potential side effects, about risks, about whether or not birth control works for them. But then those people that know that it works for them and that they want to start it and immediately begin preventing pregnancy or treating other conditions that they might have will be able to do so without needing a prescription and having to go through that barrier.
That is Dr. Jennifer Villavicencio from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, or ACOG, as it's known, joining us tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This has been a week punctuated by the January 6th committee concluding its first set of public hearings, and by President Biden announcing executive actions on climate change after congressional negotiations fell apart. That brings us to the analysis of Brooks and Capehart. That's New York Times columnist David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart, associate editor for the Washington Post. Hello to both of you.
Hey,
we always come to you when things are falling apart. But let's start with David, with January 6th. The hearings, there have now been 8 of them. They're taking a pause until the fall. What does it add up to you, for you so far?
Yeah, well, as I've confessed a few weeks in a row now, the committee has vastly outperformed what I expected, and Donald Trump vastly underperformed what I expected. So I thought he was shambolically doing his con artist, talking to the crowd. But we now know there was a lot more behind the scenes, and that there really was a lot more planning to storm the Capitol. Donald Trump was a lot more involved in encouraging, inciting, and then trying to clear the way for the people who are storming the Capitol. And I guess this week in the final session, or final for now session, we learned that he did nothing, and the clear implication from the whole string of evidence, he did nothing because he liked what was happening. And so that leads you pretty close to a DOJ or some sort of indictment.
What is it? You agree? Is that where we're headed?
I would hope so. How could you sit there last night and watch the retelling of the 187 minutes and not think, how is it possible that the President of the United States did not act to save members of Congress, to save a co-equal branch of government? I mean, what's interesting to me is we've watched 8 dramatic hearings for an event that was just last year. We all watched it in real time, and yet after hearing after hearing after hearing, new pieces of information filled in blanks. Usually, that horrified us. I mean, to see last night the syncing of the radio traffic between Vice President Pence's Secret Service security detail and the other officers in the Senate, with the video that we had all seen. But for me, what was shocking was just how close Vice President Pence came to meeting with that crowd. We knew they were close. I didn't know they were that close.
That radio traffic among his protective detail, where they were saying, "Say goodbye to my family."
Right.
You had to stop and take a breath.
These are people whose job it is to protect the life and to take a bullet for the principle. If they're afraid, that should tell you just how dangerous that situation was.
David, I asked former Senator Doug Jones, former Congresswoman Barbara Comstock a few minutes ago, if we measure success of this committee by what happens to former President Trump, how do you define what constitutes success?
I think, as Senator Jones said, they've already succeeded. I think it's the most credible seeming congressional hearing in decades for me. I think they've done quite a credible job of not overplaying their hand, with a few exceptions, and they've just risen to the occasion. Now, by that measure, I think they've done a successful job. They laid it out for the country in an objective way as it's possible in this partisan era. Now, will they succeed if they think they're going to get Donald Trump off the scene? There, I'm far less clear.
Yeah.
And so, like, there was a poll by the KSFY Star-Tribune. Liz Cheney's running for re-election. The polls showed her 22 points behind her Trump-supported backer. And why is she behind? Why do voters, 60% said they are less likely to vote for her because of she's participating in these hearings. And the most interesting part of the poll was why. It's not because they're all Trump loyalists. It's because their worlds are falling apart and they think this is a distraction. Inflation is causing a dramatic and massive reduction in people's lifestyles and living standards. And it's not that they love Donald Trump necessarily, but they're saying, my life is falling apart. What are you doing? What are you doing for me? And so there is a big disconnect. It's one thing to have a hearing in a state of normalcy, but when the country's in a state of economic crisis, a lot of people are going to say, hey, what about me? Let's deal with me.
And it is the case, Jonathan. Some people are riveted by these hearings, and others are not paying attention at all.
Right, but that doesn't mean that these hearings shouldn't happen. That doesn't mean that Congress should not investigate. I understand that people are worried about inflation and now lowering gas prices and other things that affect them personally, but the health of our democracy is at stake. And Congress has to be able to do all these things at the same time. These hearings are not necessarily about knocking Donald Trump off his pedestal or any sort of short-term game. I have always viewed these hearings as a play, laying down a marker for history, because 20 years from now, we're going to be surrounded by people for whom they either never saw what happened on January 6th or they barely remember what happened. And folks, we need an accounting of what happened on that day so that people never forget how close we came to losing everything, and also why this danger isn't over. As Totenhagen, the former Oath Keeper guy, said in testimony, that this is not over.
Yeah. Which and we could still see, as we know, David, former President Trump running for re-election again.
Yeah, I tried to game out, if he is indicted, what will the public reaction be? On the one hand, for the reasons Jonathan explained, they could just be, well, we need to protect our democracy and let the politics be damned. On the other hand, faith in institutions is so low, and there are so many people who think it's all a rigged game. I saw a poll of young people, and this is not left or right, nearly half of young people believe it's not worth voting because your vote has no matter on how we're governed. And so that's just an incredibly high level of cynicism. Will it look to people like a group of people are trying to usurp an election? I genuinely don't know what the political effect of that would be.
But part of it is, I think, some of the cynicism is they've seen what Donald Trump did for 4 years and nothing's happened to him. I mean, that's one thing you hear, is like, how could he do all these things and he's not in jail? He hasn't been arrested yet. That also plays into it.
And not only that, running
for an election.
Running again. The other one story that was, I think, in the news every day this week was the heat. The United States is baking, much of the United States, much of Europe, the rest of the world, David, and yet we see here in Washington, President Biden's climate agenda fell apart. There just aren't the votes. Joe Manchin, West Virginia, was a big part of that. We don't know what might have happened if he had stayed on board, but what's realistic now when it comes to climate change? Do we just say, gee, it's hot, and then move on to the next subject? I mean,
yeah, I defended Joe Manchin. I'm going to do it a little like, you know, Joe Manchin's a senator from West Virginia. What are you going to do? You're not going to get a more pro-climate change senator elected from the state of West Virginia. So Joe Manchin's being West Virginia. You know, I do think if you take the long arc of this thing, early days Clinton thought, and most economists think, the way to address climate change is to make carbon more expensive. So carbon taxes. That is a political non-starter. People will not pay for it, and Clinton suffered for it. The number two, which was what Biden tried to do, is to make renewables less expensive. And that was Build Back Better. And it was a very plausible, and I think a very good agenda, which is still sitting out there someday for maybe some future Senate. But in the meantime, why don't we try to do things that we can do in our political climate? And Fareed Zakaria had a good column on this. We could really reinvest in the new modular nukes, which are smaller, emission-free, much safer, and we could extend the leases of a lot of the nuclear plants that are still there, so we rely a lot more on nuclear. We could convert coal plants, which are super polluting, to natural gas power plants, which are much less polluting. Some people want to plant 1 trillion trees. Like, nobody's against trees. So, like, you can think of things that don't immediately arouse partisan fury. And I still think there are things that we could do out there, as Fareed pointed out, that wouldn't get us back into the left-right thing. Because nuclear, the Republicans are always good for it. A lot of environmentalists are now increasingly understanding of it.
Yeah, so you have, Jonathan, you have this argument, there are things that could be done. You have other people screaming the urgency of this. We have to do something yesterday.
Right, and if you listen to some of the scientists, we might even be too late now. But to David's point, I take your point. There are all these things that could be done to address climate, even if things might be too late. But the other thing I worry about is, sure, if you don't call it climate, you can maybe get some Republicans on board. But I think we've become so partisan. Washington has become so partisan that if it's proposed by a Democratic president, the Republicans will automatically be against it. And so even if it's common sense, even if it will save the planet, even if it will improve lives, they won't go for it. And until we've got President Biden in the White House, Democrat, if he can get 2, 3 more seats in the Senate, Democrats maintain the majority in the House, maybe we could see some movement on a whole lot of things, from climate to codifying Roe to protecting same-sex marriage, a whole host of things, criminal justice reform. But you know, that's like wishing on a pony. I don't know.
But the urgency, I mean, David, you do hear on one side that there's just an extreme urgency to get something done. And then on the other hand, there's the reasonable argument, let's do what we can get done politically. So,
I'm 100%. One of my heroines in life is Frances Perkins, who was Secretary of Labor. She was always for half a loaf, always for half a loaf. And I salute that. Like, you can scream and you can pretend that we're going to get rid of fossil fuels in the next 15 years, but that's not going to happen. So deal with the constraints you have, and you know, when you're passing the ball, take the 8-yard gain. And so I do think some of the things that are possible, like nobody's against trees. I think Republicans are for trees and nuclear power and things like that. So I have low tolerance for let's go to zero fossil fuels in the near term. The technology just isn't there to do that replacement. And a lot of the people leaning on Joe Biden right now to declare an emergency and ban exports on American oil and gas so we can have it here to lower oil, that's just crazy to me. To disrupt the entire oil supply chain at this moment of the Iraq War and cut off our European allies. Some of the things that are being proposed, I think I understand the impulse behind them, but it's not the real war.
Ukraine war.
Yeah, what did I say?
We all had a flashback. but it's okay. It's okay. We each get one or more per conference. But
investment products, right?
Nope. Fisher.
The original sponsor of the bill, Democrat State Assemblyman Steve Engelbright, claims he never saw this coming. Quote, "I'm not sure that one could have predicted there would be the seriousness that this has become. But overall, the bill is having positive results." I don't know, Steve. This doesn't look too positive to me. I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to be shark food this summer.
Meme, and they had some pretty funny sound clips that were attached to it. But as far as his actions and everything like that, you know, people are entitled to their opinion. And I'm not going to speak too much about the senator. However, you know, I will. He's a senator. He represents a population of a state, and you just have to look at that. That's what he represents. People are out there that are lying about it. It's just frankly call a spade a spade. It's a lie. And if you're defending that in other words, and people create other alternative narratives instead of addressing the facts that are right in front of your face. There's no getting around that Donald Trump incited it. There's no getting around that it was violent. There's no getting around that they were armed. And people knew about it. And they were there with the purpose of stopping the certification of the election. That's it. You can't debate that with me.
Yeah. And lastly, you still, work as a Capitol Police officer. Do these members apologize? Do they say anything to you? Those who were on the insurrectionist side, do they address it ever?
You know, when I do my job, I really just do it as I'm doing my job. It's business as usual. I don't, get into it. A lot of the things that I'm doing now, I do in my spare time. It's my personal time. When I'm on the job, it's about defending these members. I had a member come up to me yesterday, middle of the week. I didn't know if it was a Democrat, Republican, and they just said, "Hey, I thank you for your service. You're amazing." I don't know. I didn't really ask, but I appreciate it. I'm not doing anything for any recognition. I'm doing my speaking out and doing my job, one, because it's the right thing to do, and to speaking out to get accountability and justice. Anybody who has anything to do with the failures of that day, including the president, needs to be held accountable, period.
Well, I thank you, and I think everybody who's watching right now thanks you for your service and what you did. You all saved our Capitol, and you saved our democracy that day and put your bodies on the line for us, so thank you. We appreciate you. And Officer Harry Dunn, we appreciate you. Thanks. And up next, remember when Watergate was the biggest scandal in White House history? Former Watergate Assistant Special Prosecutor Nick Ackerman joins me next with his thoughts on these riveting January 6th hearings. We're back after this.
Meet Ring Alarm. It's the home protecting, easy installing, crime deterring, professional monitoring, first responding, flood sensing, smoke detecting security system that you can pick up and install on your own today.
A surgeon will be...
Now, Dakota News Now is sponsored by Billion Automotive.
Hi, I'm Governor Kristi Noem. The Supreme Court has made the right decision to allow states to make their own choices on abortion. In South Dakota, we value life, but being pro-life doesn't just mean caring about the unborn. It also means getting moms the help that they need to be successful. We're launching life.sd.gov. This website has resources to help women navigate pregnancy, birth, parenting, and adoption. In South Dakota, we will support moms and babies both before birth and after.
American speed, there's nothing like it. And this generation has it, chasing history with the whole world chasing them. The World Track and Field Championships, coverage presented in part by Xfinity.
Talk, whisper. Diaz-Barragán, Democrat of California, on Wednesday said Hispanic lawmakers are struggling to reach voters in their own communities unless it's right before an election, calling it one of the biggest problems that we have. The polling shows Barragán is onto something. Recent Quinnipiac poll showed just 26% of Hispanic voters approved of President Biden's job performance, the lowest of any demographic group. That compares to 2016, when Hillary Clinton overwhelmingly won the Hispanic vote by close to 50%. Republicans continue to court immigrants, and specifically Hispanics. A new RNC program helps immigrants prepare for the citizen naturalization test in battleground states across the country. Brian Enton is in Florida, the swing state of swing states. Why do Republicans feel they have this inroad with immigrants, specifically Hispanics, right now?
Well, it's very interesting, Leland. This is called, you mentioned it, the Republican Civics Initiative, and it's popping up all over the place, including Florida, where we are. We're in Doral, Florida, which is right outside Miami. Huge Hispanic population. We're in this strip mall. This is actually an old dry cleaner behind me that they've converted. And they have these classes at night where Hispanics come. You don't have to be Republican, and they will teach you about, the Constitution, American history, so you're ready for this civics test. These are people who have had their green card for at least 5 years and are now ready to take the test. Many of them do identify as Republicans. We came to the class last night. This room behind me was totally full. Listen to what a couple of the participants told me.
Do you identify as a Republican?
Of course. Of course, I come in from a communist country, so I really know what is living under communists. And I want to vote because I want to fight against communists in this country. That's why I love this country.
One of the things that I actually I'm here for is not only for, study for the U.S. citizen exam, is also because I would like to know the history of this great nation.
It was interesting, Leland, what that woman you heard say there. That was really the opinion of most of the people we talked to at the class last night. Many of them are from Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, places with communism and socialism in the past. And they are very, very concerned, and they say that is why they identify with the Republican Party.
Okay, so that's why they identify. Explain sort of how Republicans now hope to capitalize on this. You come to the civics class, and then what?
So it's interesting. We observed the class last night. They don't tell you to be a Republican or talk about what it's like to be a Republican. The class is just to prepare you for the test. But they chat during the break. They chat afterwards. And what they're hoping is that there's this group of people who have the green card, who are ready to take the test, that group of people could actually make a difference at the polls. And it was very, very interesting talking to them about what's happening at the border, because they see other immigrants coming over the border illegally. These are people in these classes who have spent a lot of time and a lot of money. I mean, think about it. They've had their green card for 5 years alone. You have to pay all these fees to even get to this point. And they're very, very upset about what they've seen at the border, which is something that struck me the most. I talked to the director here about that. Listen to what he said.
We see what's happening at the border with so many people coming across illegally. It's interesting being in this class with people who
are doing it the legal way. These are people with green cards who now want to become citizens.
And these people that have done the immigration process legally, they don't like other people to come to this country without having to pass what they have passed. These people paid a lot of fees to the immigration system. They have done everything that they needed to. They have filled a lot of forms, and it's not fair. And a lot of them are waiting for something to happen in their processes, and that takes a very long time.
Yeah, he was right. They really don't like it, the people we talked to last night. You know, these are people who work all day long, jobs here in Miami, and then they come at night to take this class. They feel like they're putting all of this work in, and they say, frankly, they don't like what's happening at the border.
Yeah, and they pay taxes as well. We're seeing shifts in Hispanic districts in Texas as well along the same lines. Brian, thank you. Great reporting. We'll be right back.
Tuesday night, a News Nation exclusive. Chris Cuomo sits down one-on-one with News Nation.
Next category is, whose culture is it anyway? This pop star hasn't had a hit single in quite some time, and now in her new music video, she's being accused of cultural appropriation.
I think the visual element adds to it in terms of being able to make it make sense to a country that is so disunited and where we don't have a common culture.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, this is basically what's done in the courtroom now. I mean, this is something that's developed over the years using demonstratives, using models, and they basically effectively put that right on the screen for the public to see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so helpful to actually be able to see it. I mean, the old days when you take a jury out to the crime scene, you want to show them what it looks like. This is where the murder took place.
Yeah.
But here they can actually recreate what happened and what it looked like just by models.
Yeah.
And it's very, very effective.
And you know it's effective because Fox News ignored it. Like when Fox News is refusing to play it, that means they know it's effective. I mean, last night, this is what they were playing. They just ignored it. And they, of course, had Josh Hawley on, or Senator Fist Pump, was on there on their network while everyone else was watching the hearings. They're trying to sort of isolate their people from it. But I mean, we're talking about, 17 million people across 10 networks just last night. What do you make of the fact that Trump's home network is ignoring it? Trying to.
I mean, they're trying to, but you can't completely ignore it.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, there's going to be a number of people who are Republicans, who are diehard Trumpers that aren't going to watch this, but you're not talking about a big margin of people that need to be educated and need to be looking at this. You're talking, there are more independents now these days than there are party members. So if you can reach the independents, if you can reach the vast majority of the public, it really is having a big impact.
One of the things that's similar, I mean, Lawrence O'Donnell last night said Trump's only knowledge of history is the Nixon era. That's the only, he's as far back as he probably can go. But there are some similarities. There are these outside groups that are working with the president to achieve his aims, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Roger Stones, the Mike Flynn's, very similar to the Nixons.
Well, Roger Stone is the common denominator.
And he's the common denominator. What do you make of these common denominators?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's correct. I mean, the committee did a great job of showing what happened inside the White House, bringing in White House employees, people who are really dedicated, like Matthew Pottinger, who understood what the rule of law is, Pat Cipollone, who understood what his oath was to the U.S. Constitution. But there was this whole other group that we really didn't hear about. Yeah. This rogue group of miscreants and no-goodniks who were hanging out at the Warwick Hotel and the War Room of all places. Yeah. And if you actually look at who those people were, they have one thing, all of them in common. They either were pardoned by Donald Trump of crimes they committed, or they asked Donald Trump to be pardoned for crimes they were committing. Yeah. You've got the two really ringleaders of this, our friend Steve Bannon, who was convicted today of contempt. I mean, he's the person who, before the election in October, said that Trump was just going to declare victory on election night. I mean, that's their technique. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing he told his friend in Pennsylvania that he picked for Republican nominee for Senate, the Wizard of Oz. Yeah. Declare victory. Yeah. Okay, the votes aren't in, but just declare victory.
As an expert on these things, what would be your guess as to whether or not Trump winds up getting prosecuted?
Oh, I think he's going to get prosecuted.
You do?
And I think
federally?
I think it's going to be in Georgia. because the chief witness in that case, the star witness, is Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
Because they've got him on tape.
Yeah.
And then all of this corroborating evidence that surrounds it that the January 6th committee has put together, they can either put it in as evidence to show motive, intent, pattern, or they can put it in a Georgia RICO case. And the Georgia RICO statute is actually much more potent than even the federal one. It's an easier statute to prove than it is if you're trying to put together a RICO case under the federal system.
Interesting. So you think Georgia is where he faces
I think that's where he's got the real problem, because I think you're going to be able to put together a case in the federal system.
Yeah.
You don't have them on tape.
Yeah.
You've got witnesses. And at the end of the day, Merrick Garland is stuck with this choice of, I've got a conflict because he's running against my boss.
Absolutely.
And so he may defer and
you never
not
know.
prosecute and let Georgia take the case.
All right, well,
Both of them won't.
I got to go because there's a whole nother show that's supposed to come on. Happy birthday, George Clinton. It's George Clinton's birthday. And Nick Ackerman, thank you very much. That's tonight's Read It All with Chris Hayes starts literally right now.
Tonight, the hallmark of any authoritarian regime is politicized justice. Under that system, your opponents go to jail, your supporters can do whatever they want. And this reveals that the state exists not to serve the people who live in it, but to preserve itself and to crush all dissent. You hate to think we've reached a point anywhere near that here in the United States, because there's nothing worse than that, or scarier, or harder to fix. But in fact, we have reached that point. That's where we are. Yesterday, for example, a man leaped on stage at a campaign event and tried to stab Lee Zeldin. Zeldin's a sitting member of Congress. He's challenging the unelected incumbent Kathy Hochul in the governor's race in New York. So ordinarily, attempting to assassinate a federal office holder would be considered a big deal. But Lee Zeldin is a Republican, so it's not a big deal anymore. The man who tried to murder Lee Zeldin was released immediately with no bail. Less than
at social media, thanking his lawyers, patting them on the back. But then when the jury came in to deliver their verdict, they came in about 2.5 hours after they started. When they came in, Steve Bannon didn't show a lot of emotion. He smirked a little bit. He nodded as the judge thanked the jury, but ultimately he wasn't really that reactive in court. And the jury had
the torture that took place here. In October 2020, the killer's brother Gary Mansfield tipped off deputies to search the property after they arrested him on drug charges. John says last July,
calling senators, apparently, and Rudy Giuliani to help facilitate the coup, watching fallout from his insurrection live on Fox News. We also learned, and this was very new and incredibly striking, that a White House security official heard Secret Service agents telling their families goodbye because they thought they were about to be murdered by the armed, violent mob that the President of the United States had sicked on them. But in some ways, many of the most effective moments from last night's hearing didn't contain new information, new revelations, things we didn't know before. Rather, the committee was simply returning all of us to the mindset of January 6th, the days immediately after, when there really was, at least for a brief moment, pretty close to true unanimity that what had happened, that the storming of the Capitol and the violent attempt to block the peaceful transfer of power and overturn American democracy was horrible, was a disgrace, and that Donald Trump was the one who made it happen and could have stopped it, but chose not to. That is the plain and simple truth, which, at least for a little while, really was evident to just about everyone. I mean,
consistent standard. We've seen it again and again and again. Former Clinton attorney Michael Sussman was just acquitted by a D.C. jury of lying to the FBI. That happened in May. The theory was that really, who knows what Michael Sussman told the FBI about non-existent Russian servers in Trump Tower? Okay. As long as we're using that theory, does it work for everyone? Well, it didn't work for George Papadopoulos. Didn't work for Michael Flynn. On the other hand, neither one of those guys had a key card to FBI headquarters like Michael Sussman did. And that came in handy, that relationship. But Mike Flynn didn't have that relationship. His life was destroyed. Why? Because of handwritten notes by Peter Strzok, who you can now see on MSNBC, about their conversation in the White House about Russian sanctions.
You have got to stop this. You are the only person who can call this off. Call it off. The election is over. Call it off.
The violence
destruction, and chaos we saw earlier was unacceptable, undemocratic, and un-American. It was the saddest day I've ever had as serving as a member of this institution. The President bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding. These facts require immediate action by President Trump.
Madam Speaker, today the People's House was attacked, which is an attack on the Republic itself. There is no excuse for it. A woman died, and people need to go to jail. And the President should never have spun up certain Americans to believe something that simply cannot be.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it. The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instructions of their president. And having that belief was a foreseeable consequence of the growing crescendo of false statements, conspiracy theories, and reckless hyperbole, which the defeated president kept shouting into the largest megaphone on planet Earth. A mob was assaulting the Capitol in his name. These criminals were carrying his banners, hanging his flags, and screaming their loyalty to him. It was obvious that only President Trump could end this. He was the only one.
Even to argue that his subpoena was legally invalid. Why couldn't he argue that? All Steve Bannon was allowed to do was shut up. He had to remain silent and await his conviction, and that's what he did. Outside of federal court today, Steve Bannon pointed out that he subpoenaed members of the January 6th committee to testify at his trial. Why can't you face your accusers? Isn't that guaranteed under our system? Not in this case. Because having the January 6th committee members show up would expose them to the one thing they cannot tolerate, which is cross-examination. So they refused. Watch.
I want to thank the jury for what the effort they did, the judge, particularly the court administration here, everybody. I only have one disappointment, and that is the gutless members of that show trial committee. The J6 committee didn't have the guts to come down here and testify in open court.
Did you expect Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger to show up?
Share tonight.
Just the time frame alone shows that you never know what's going to happen or what's going to turn up to allow some closure. It happens every day. It happens more often than people think it happens. And I would also like to make sure that parents take seriously the education of their children regarding potential predators like this that do exist in the world. They're out there. He wasn't the first and he won't be the last, and they need to teach them self-awareness and maybe even some self-defense if possible.
Yeah. Margaret Johns, we certainly appreciate your time.
Communication or wink and nod communication, should Trump run again, I'm sure Bannon will be behind it. But it is telling to me that there is public distance between Trump and Bannon at this point.
And Jeffrey, what about the claim of a bulletproof appeal from Bannon's counsel, who's basing that on the idea that Bannon was doing this or defied the subpoena on advice of counsel, and that wasn't allowed to be submitted? Is that something that can be appealed?
No, I don't think so. I think that, you know, it's just more bluster, more performance art from Bannon that has no...
I said in the White House.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought you said who else on the staff. I can't reveal communications, but obviously I think, you know, Yeah.
A trailed off sentence worth 1,000 words, right? Obviously, you know. What? Yeah, we do know. Pat Cipollone. That internal disgust with Trump was also on display with the flood of resignations after the 6th, starting with the 2 witnesses last night, Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Matthews, Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Pottinger, and including Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos and Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao, the wife of Mitch McConnell, among others. The public at large was also fed up with Trump. You could see it there on your screen. His lowest approval rating ever as he walked out the door, 29%, was immediately after January 6th. As the whole country was processing the violence and terror of that day, it really felt like a much overdue reckoning on 4 years of a disastrous and dangerous presidency. But then, well, something happened. Time, part of it, combination of right-wing media returning home, closing ranks around Trump, the metastasization of the big lie, and addiction among the right-wing base to conspiracy theories and resentment from much of the folks that make up the Republican Party's foot soldiers. Slowly led people to just kind of forget, or to whitewash, or to memory hole, or to pretend to forget. But in that immediate aftermath of the insurrection, as everyone saw that happening, playing out on their TV screens, knowing the president wasn't doing anything to stop it, was in fact sending a tweet to target Mike Pence, everyone watching that, in the aftermath, they knew and felt the same way. What had happened? What happened was wrong, that Donald Trump was to blame. And I gotta say, I thought last night was a masterful attempt to just reclaim that simple consensus. Congressman Jamie Raskin is Democrat American.
Time. So, of course, there was no inquiry as to why a Capitol Hill police officer with a documented history of recklessly mishandling firearms shot an unarmed woman in the neck, an Air Force veteran. He shot her in the neck. Why? You're not allowed to ask. What happened to those thousands of hours of surveillance footage? Why can't we see those? Nah, you're not allowed even to ask why we're not allowed to see them. We can't know why police are on video letting people into the Capitol complex on January 6th. Why is that? Not allowed to ask. And this is going to continue. As Adam Kinzinger said, this charade, which really does corrode the heart of our system, this will continue all the way till the midterms, because as Kinzinger, who's dumb enough to say the quiet part out loud, admitted, this is a political exercise. Watch.
This investigation is not winding down. We may be towards the end of this tranche of hearings. We may have more hearings in the future, and the investigation is still ongoing. So we're getting to the bottom of what we need to know.
Yeah, okay. We're getting to the bottom. Actually, you're preventing legitimate, obvious questions from being asked. And just in point of fact, no matter how long these hearings go on, they could go on forever, and Adam Kinzinger will still be a sad, tormented, tiny man with a miserable personal life. So, you know.
The fact that we are not immunizing as many people as we used to, particularly children. We know immunizations have dropped off during COVID. And the fact that it's detected in the wastewater in London suggests that it's getting into the community at low levels. We need about 80% of the community immunized before the defenses go up. There is an oral vaccine that's used not in the United States that's live. It's not causing disease, but it can revert to the type that causes real disease if the defenses in the community are low.
Yeah, so this is a case of an unvaccinated young adult. We do know that. Any idea or indication of how he could have gotten this?
Yeah, so it's likely that he got it from contact with someone who had the oral vaccine, which is live from another country, came to visit the United States. And because that individual was susceptible, was able to get infected in that way.
And this is a county and a community in New York that is known for vaccine resistance. Is that something that, as an infectious disease expert, you're looking at or tracking as well?
Yes, totally. I mean, there are very prominent pockets and communities in the United States